This Python code is an example of simple DNS server that maps domain names to IP addresses and responds to DNS queries with the corresponding IP addresses and CNAME records. So first let's talk about the server side of the code. In the first line we import socket. Uh, it is a module that provides access to socket interface. Next we have DNS table. It is a dictionary that holds mapping of domain names to IP addresses. Then there is CNAME records. This is also a dictionary. It holds the mapping of domain names to canonical names, also called CNAMEs. The next line, it creates a UDP socket object named client socket, and it uses IPv4 addressing, which is displayed here using AF inet, and it is a UDP protocol because it is here SOC diagram. In the next line it just prints that the server is running. Next, the line IP address. This line gets the host name of server by using get hostname method, and then it resolves it to an IP address using get host by name. It gets it by doing a reverse lookup. Okay, so next line is just it displays the IP address that it has fetched using the above method. After this, this line binds the socket to specified address and port. In this case, the port IP address is 127.0.2.1 and the port is 9992. This should be same on both the server and the client side so that the communication can be successful. Next, it starts an infinite loop to continuously receive and respond to DNS queries. This receives data, that is a DNS query, from the client. It can receive up to 1024 bytes of data and stores the address of client from which the data was received. The next line creates a message indicating which client requested to fetch data. It formats the client's address into a string and appends it in the message, and the message is printed. Next, this line data is equal to data decode. It decodes the received data, which is in bytes, into a string. Then the line looks up the received domain name in the DNS table, in this DNS table dictionary. If the domain name is found, it retrieves the corresponding IP address. Otherwise, it sets the IP address to data not found, and it then encodes the IP address into bytes. In the next, this line CNAME, what it does is it looks up the received domain name in the CNAME record dictionary to find the corresponding CNAME record. If the domain name is found, it retrieves the corresponding CNAME. Otherwise, it sets the CNAME to none and then encodes the CNAME into bytes. And next, it sends the IP address response back to the client. It uses the send to method of the socket object and specifies the IP address, bytes, and the client's address. The next, send one. This line sends the CNAME response back to the client in a similar manner as the previous send function line. This code essentially listens for DNS queries, looks up the corresponding IP address and CNAME record, and sends it back to the client. Now let's discuss the client side of the code. It is very similar to the server side of the code. First we import the socket, and then we create a variable client address that stores the IP address of the client. Next, we create a UDP socket object named client socket. It uses IPv4 addressing and is a UDP protocol. Next, we have address. This line stores the IP address of the client and the port number of the DNS server. The next is the user decision variable. It is initialized to y. to start the loop for querying domain names. Next, the line prompts user to enter the name, this line right here, and it prints a welcome message. The next is the while loop. This starts a loop that continues as long as the user decides to make queries for the domain names. The prompt, the next line is input. This line prompts the user to enter a domain name for which they want to retrieve the IP address. The next line, that is send line, this one, line number 14. This line sends the domain name input by the user to the server. It encodes the domain name string into bytes before sending. After that, the line number 16 here, it represents that it receives the IP address response from the server. It can receive up to 1024 bytes of data and also stores the address of server from which the data is received. The next line receives the CNAME response from the server in a similar manner to the line number 16. Next, the server reply. This line decodes the received IP address bytes into a string and removes any white spaces, because we have used here the strip function. The strip function is used to remove any white spaces that are not required, and it prevents any unwanted errors. The next line, what the line number 21 does is that it constructs a message indicating that the IP address for the query domain name and its corresponding CNAME, and it prints the message. This user decision asks the user that whether it wants to continue asking for domain names, or do the user wants to end the program. So if the user selects yes, then the whole loop starts again, and if the user decides not to continue, then it is greeted by a message that prints that the program has ended, and this line at the last, it closes the client socket connection for security. What this code basically does is that it prompts the user for domain names, sends it to the server, receives and displays the corresponding IP address and the CNAME, and then asks the user if they want to continue the query.